For centuries, humanity has spun tales of the night, whispers of pale, immortal beings who feast on the living. We call them vampires. But what if these legends are not mere flights of fancy, charming fables designed to scare children, but fragmented echoes of a terrifyingly coherent truth? What if, concealed beneath the layers of folklore and sensationalized fiction, exists a parallel history? Their history. A clandestine timeline stretching back to the genesis of our own world, and perhaps even beyond. Imagine for a moment an ancient, hidden lineage, a species far older, far more complex, and infinitely more powerful than any myth dares suggest. If they exist, how did they truly begin? What was their primal origin before humanity even conceived of such a creature? How did they survive the ravages of plagues that decimated our populations, the monumental shifts of empires, and the relentless, inquisitive march of human scientific progress? And how do they, even now, continue to exert influence, shaping our world from the deepest, most impenetrable shadows? Their existence a carefully guarded secret. Tonight, on Ancient Unearth, we dare to pull back the veil. We are not exploring the history of a myth, but embarking on an unprecedented investigation into the secret, verified timeline of the vampire species itself. From their very genesis, a moment of profound transformation that echoes through forgotten spiritual texts, through the trials of millennia, to their cunning adaptation in the blinding light of the modern age. This is a definitive account of a hidden existence, a clandestine world that touches our own in ways we can barely comprehend. Prepare to confront a reality more chilling, more intricate, and more profoundly unsettling than any legend. This is the true, untold history of the vampire. To understand the vampire, we must abandon conventional history and delve into realms often dismissed as mere theology or ancient mysticism. Our investigation into their true genesis leads us not to a dusty Transylvanian crypt, nor a cursed human, but to the very dawn of creation itself, and to an ancient theological proposition, the profound cosmic event of a fall from grace. Ancient texts, particularly those rooted in Abrahamic traditions and esoteric Kabbalistic lore, speak of powerful celestial beings, entities of pure light and immense power. Among these, the seraphims stand paramount, beings described as aflame with divine love, positioned closest to the Almighty, tasked with guarding the divine throne. Yet the lore hints at deviation, rebellion, a monumental defiance of divine will. Here, in their true history, is where the primal lineage begins. Consider a being like Seraphiel, often named as a powerful seraph, or associated with other archangels of judgment, or even figures like Samael, the angel of death, in various mystical texts. In this radical understanding of their origin, a faction of these exalted beings, consumed by pride or a desire for ultimate autonomy, committed an unforgivable transgression. They defied the Creator. The consequence was not simple annihilation, but a radical, transformative curse. Stripped of their original purity and their direct sustenance from divine light, these fallen beings were irrevocably altered. Their eternal existence remained, but now it was driven by an unholy, agonizing hunger. They were condemned to sustain their vast power, their very immortality, by drawing the life force, the spiritual essence of others. This cosmic drain, this unholy thirst, became the true, fundamental hunger of the first vampires. They remained immortal, breathtakingly powerful, possessing faculties beyond human comprehension, yet eternally severed from true grace, forever feeding on what they once radiated in divine perfection. This original curse is understood to be the very essence of vampirism. If the progenitor of the vampire species was indeed a fallen angelic being, condemned to feed on essence and cast out from divine light, how does that elevate their status beyond mere monsters? Does it explain their inherent ancient power, their often aristocratic disdain for humanity, and their profound spiritual weakness to symbols of faith? These first generation, the direct descendants or immediate recipients of this cosmic curse, were few in number, but immensely potent. They were the progenitors, their bodies now existing in a liminal state, neither fully alive nor truly dead by conventional standards, but animated by this profound, insatiable hunger. Their early presence on Earth was subtle, yet profoundly felt. They moved through nascent human civilizations, their existence dimly perceived, their unique feeding methods distorted into early human myths. The Sumerian Lilitu, draining vitality, the Greek Lamia, cursed and consuming essence, the Roman larvae, restless spirits consuming life energy. These were not yet vampires as we know them, but perhaps fragmented human interpretations, primal echoes of encounters with these impossibly ancient, powerful, and hungry beings. They largely existed in the deepest shadows, their immense powers and absolute control over their forms, allowing them to remain largely undetected. Their influence felt more as an unexplained dread or a mysterious drain on communities. This divine fall, therefore, is not just a myth for humans, but a traumatic, transformative event in their true history, giving birth to a predatory species whose very existence is a perversion of divine creation and order. Their nature, from the very beginning, was defined by a constant, inescapable hunger. To truly grasp the genesis of the vampire species, we must journey beyond human history, beyond earthly realms, and delve into a narrative woven from ancient spiritual understanding. This is the tale of Seraphiel, the angel of light, whose profound defiance birthed the very first vampire. Imagine Seraphiel as he once was, a being of incandescent glory, a seraph among the highest order of angels, whose very presence burned with divine love and knowledge. His form, a tapestry of light, stood closest to the Creator's throne, his purpose to guard its sanctity and reflect the purest essence of the divine. He oversaw celestial hierarchies, a being of immense intellect and unparalleled power. Yet, within that sublime perfection, a seed of ambition, or perhaps a terrifying clarity of will, began to stir. The precise nature of his transgression remained shrouded in the deepest cosmic mysteries. Was it a refusal to bow before humanity deemed lesser creations? Was it an act of supreme pride, a belief in his own light surpassing even the divine? Or was it a fundamental disagreement with the Creator's unfolding plan, a desire to forge a different path for the celestial hosts? Whatever the catalyst, Seraphiel, along with a significant host of his brethren, made a choice. It was an act of profound, deliberate rebellion against the supreme order, a severance from the very source of their boundless grace. The consequence was not annihilation, for the very essence of such a powerful being could not simply cease. Instead, it was a curse of unimaginable magnitude, perfectly tailored to his defiance. Stripped of his original pure sustenance from divine light and grace, Seraphiel found his eternal existence transformed. The boundless energy that once flowed effortlessly from the divine source was severed. In its place emerged an insatiable hunger, a gnawing void that could only be filled by an external force. His radiant form, though retaining its ethereal beauty, became a vessel of profound lack. This insatiable hunger manifested as a desperate need to draw the life force, the spiritual vitality, from other living beings. He, and those who shared his curse, discovered that human blood, teeming with essence, served as a potent, albeit imperfect, conduit for this desperate sustenance. This was the birth of the first vampire. Not a transformation by contagion, but a radical, fundamental alteration of being. Seraphiel, once a guardian of light, became a creature of shadows, condemned to eternally consume the vitality of others to fuel his undying existence. His immortality, once a gift of boundless being, became a perpetual torment, binding him to this unending, unholy thirst. How does the fall of such a magnificent, powerful entity resonate through the entire lineage of vampires, explaining not just their hunger, but their inherent arrogance, their profound loneliness, and their complex relationship with humanity? From this cosmic act of defiance, this profound transformation of a celestial being into a predator of life force, the true characteristics of the vampire species were forged. Their chilling power, their hypnotic allure, their unnatural strength, these are but residual echoes of their angelic origin. Yet, their deep vulnerabilities to sunlight, to holy symbols, to consecrated ground, are direct, constant reminders of the divine light they forfeited and the grace they lost. Seraphiel's tale is not just a Genesis story. It's the fundamental blueprint for every vampire that would follow, a testament to the eternal consequence of a single, monumental fall. From their celestial origins, the vampire species began its slow, insidious spread across the human world. These first generation, cursed with an eternal hunger for essence, discovered a new, more visceral and readily available form of sustenance: human blood. It wasn't just sustenance, but a powerful conduit for the life force they craved, a direct link to the vitality that had been denied to them. And with this discovery came the ability to multiply, to create others in their image, thereby expanding their own peculiar family. The process of conversion in these early centuries was often crude, violent, and far from the romanticized bite of later fiction. It wasn't merely a transfer of bodily fluid. It was a complex, perilous ritual that initiated a profound, often traumatic, spiritual and physical transformation in the human recipient. Perhaps it was a desperate act of survival by the ancient progenitors to increase their numbers, or a primitive, uncontrolled transmission of their curse to mortals. These early offspring often lacked the self-control and refinement of their elders, manifesting as monstrous feral entities, driven by an unbridled, newly awakened thirst. This is where the true vampire family tree begins to branch rapidly, forming distinct and often competing lineages. These nascent, less controlled vampires were the true source of the terrifying undead corpse phenomenon that haunted medieval Eastern Europe. Imagine a newly converted vampire, perhaps a peasant, unguided by an ancient progenitor or lacking the inherent discipline of the older lines. Its physical body, not yet fully adapted to its new liminal state, might have decayed imperfectly, leading to the bloated, ruddy, blood-smeared corpses that terrified villagers and sparked widespread panics. These were not mere superstitious beliefs about decomposition. They were terrifyingly real encounters with raw, uncontrolled vampiric manifestations, a messy and dangerous period in the species' expansion. When you consider the devastating impact of diseases like the Black Death, which wiped out up to 50% of Europe's population, how might the sheer scale of death and the accompanying psychological trauma have fueled these beliefs in returning dead, turning natural tragedy into supernatural terror and providing ample opportunities for undisciplined conversions? As these horrific encounters became more frequent, humanity, particularly through the lens of organized religion, developed countermeasures. The Church's response to what it perceived as demonic manifestations or unholy abominations was fierce. They fought not just a physical enemy, but a spiritual one. The use of holy symbols like the crucifix, holy water, and consecrated ground against these creatures was not superstition. In their history, these were tangible weaknesses that harnessed opposing divine or spiritual forces, causing them pain, disorientation, or outright destruction. The very lack of grace in the vampire's being made these symbols anathema. The staking of the heart, the decapitation, the burning. These brutal methods became necessary means of eradication against these crude yet dangerous early lines of vampires, as humans slowly, instinctively discovered their vulnerabilities. Different vampire clans or lineages began to emerge, often tied to geographical regions or specific progenitors who had perfected their conversion processes. Some lines might have been more susceptible to sun, others to fire, depending on the nature of their creation or inherited curse, creating a fascinating, albeit deadly, internal diversity within the species. These early centuries were a period of desperate survival for the vampire species, as they learned to control their hunger, refine their conversions, and navigate a world increasingly hostile to their very existence. This ongoing struggle shaped their nature and their strategies for millennia to come, forcing them towards greater discipline and a desperate need for secrecy. For the vampire species, the greatest existential threat did not come from medieval superstition or silver weapons, but from a new, insidious human force, the Age of Enlightenment. As humanity embraced reason, logic, and scientific inquiry in the 18th century, the era of unquestioning belief in overt supernatural phenomena waned. For the vampire, this meant a critical choice: adapt or face widespread eradication. The great vampire epidemic of the 18th century, particularly in Habsburg territories like Serbia, was not a mere folklore panic in our history books. From their perspective, it was a dangerous period of unprecedented exposure and near catastrophe, when human medical officers like Gerard van Swieten began to meticulously document and explain the decomposition of bodies. The horrifying signs of undeath were attributed not to supernatural curses, but to misdiagnosed death and natural processes. This scientific scrutiny was a direct, existential threat to the vampire's secrecy, threatening to expose their very existence. Imagine being an ancient vampire, having thrived in the shadows of superstition, suddenly confronted with the piercing light of human reason and burgeoning science. How would you, as a member of this hidden species, orchestrate the survival of your kind? What drastic unseen measures would you take to avoid eradication in an age where reason sought to explain and thus dismantle your very existence? This period forced a profound, species-wide evolutionary leap for the vampire. The visible, monstrous forms of earlier centuries, the ones that caused public panic, were becoming too dangerous, too easily explained away by the emerging scientific method. To survive, vampires had to become masters of concealment and manipulation. they ceased the uncontrolled, crude conversions that led to public exhumations and undeniable evidence. The older, more feral lineages, unable or unwilling to adapt to the new realities, either died out, were culled by their more discerning brethren to protect the species, or were systematically eradicated by humans. This necessity gave rise to the refined, aristocratic vampire. This was a deliberate, collective effort by the most ancient and powerful lineages to ensure their survival. They perfected their control over their physical forms, appearing pristine and unmarked, even in death, preventing the telltale signs of decomposition that had doomed so many of their kind. They honed their abilities to blend seamlessly into human society, often adopting positions of immense wealth, influence, and political power to protect their secret and secure their blood supply discreetly. The shift from the peasant vampire to the noble vampire was not just a literary trope. It was a critical, calculated survival strategy. The official repudiation of vampires by figures like Empress Maria Theresa, based on Van Sweeten's scientific report, was a victory for humanity. But from their perspective, it was a cunningly manipulated strategic victory for the vampire species. By retreating further into the shadows, by making their existence seem like mere superstition to human authorities, they secured their continued existence. The Age of Reason, ironically, became their greatest and most effective veil. This era cemented the vampire's commitment to absolute secrecy, a doctrine that would guide their actions for centuries, ensuring that their intricate family trees and ancient bloodlines could flourish undisturbed, unseen, in a world that no longer believed in them. With the dangers of the Enlightenment averted and a new doctrine of absolute secrecy firmly in place, the vampire species entered a new, dominant phase of their hidden history, the age of aristocratic ascendancy. This period saw the rise of powerful, sophisticated vampire houses, individuals who not only mastered concealment, but also began to subtly influence human affairs from behind the scenes, weaving themselves into the very fabric of our emerging global society. Among these, one figure rose to preeminence, his legend echoing, albeit distortedly, even in our own history, Dracula. Count Dracula, as the most prominent member of an ancient dominant lineage, was not just a fictional character for us. He was a living, breathing, immensely powerful vampire who orchestrated events across centuries. His family line, steeped in millennia of power and influence stretching back to the primal origins, represented the pinnacle of vampiric adaptation and control. He understood the nuances of human society, its politics, its economy, and its psychology better than most humans themselves. His connection to the historical Vlad III Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, the 15th century Prince of Wallachia, is not mere inspiration, but a chilling reality from their perspective. Vlad the Impaler, known for his brutal efficiency and terror tactics against invaders and traitors, was in fact either a direct thrall, a carefully cultivated human pawn, or perhaps even a mortal persona adopted by Dracula himself for a strategic period. The moniker Dracula, meaning son of the dragon or son of the devil, was a title Vlad the Impaler bore, and in the secret history of vampires, it linked him directly to this ancient, powerful vampire lineage, a subtle branding that resonated with power and fear. Can you imagine the cunning required for a vampire to manipulate a human ruler, directing his cruelty to create a buffer state or to instill fear that served vampiric interests, all while remaining unseen? Dracula and vampires of his caliber didn't just hide. they actively exerted profound influence. They were the true architects behind certain political intrigues, the silent investors behind vast financial movements, and even the clandestine patrons of artistic and scientific pursuits, subtly shaping human history to their own ends. Their vast wealth, accumulated over centuries, and their unparalleled network of human agents and vampiric contacts made them formidable forces, invisible to the masses. They valued bloodlines, not just their own, but those of influential human families they could manipulate, cultivate, or discreetly feed upon. This period truly highlights the intricate family tree dynamic within the vampire species, with powerful progenitors and their well-disciplined progeny dominating weaker, less organized lines, often establishing vast territories under their unseen control. The Victorian era, with its rigid social structures, its booming industrialization, and its underlying fascination with the exotic and forbidden, provided the perfect cover for these aristocratic vampires. The human obsession with tales of the supernatural, as seen in the popularity of Gothic literature, was not accidental. It was a carefully managed consequence of their existence. When Bram Stoker began writing his seminal novel, it wasn't just imagination. It was, from their perspective, a controlled release of carefully curated information, a subtly orchestrated narrative designed to both tantalize and misdirect. If our beloved Gothic novels and the very image of Dracula were, in fact, carefully crafted pieces of disinformation, how much of what we believe about vampires is a deliberate fabrication designed to keep them hidden in plain sight, to make them seem less real or even alluring? The rise of Dracula and his lineage symbolize the vampire species' mastery of stealth, manipulation, and long-term planning. They were no longer simply monstrous peasants. They were the hidden elite, pulling strings, observing from their ancestral strongholds, preparing for an even greater challenge, the unforgiving glare of the modern world. In the secret, ancient history of the vampire species, certain names resonate with more power and significance than any other. Few are as universally recognized, yet profoundly misunderstood, as Dracula. For much of humanity, he remains a figure of Gothic literature. But in their true timeline, he is an ancient, immensely powerful vampire whose very existence irrevocably intertwined with one of history's most brutal rulers, Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, known to our historical records as Vlad the Impaler. The connection between the vampire known as Dracula and the human prince is far more than mere inspiration. It is a chilling reality, a pivotal moment in the vampire's concealed history. Vlad Tepes, born in 1431 in Transylvania, was a ruler forged in a crucible of constant warfare. His homeland, Wallachia, lay on the volatile frontier between Christian Europe and the expanding Ottoman Empire. His early life was harsh. He and his younger brother were even held hostage by the Ottomans for several years, an experience that undoubtedly shaped his worldview and his capacity for extreme measures. Vlad gained his infamous moniker, the Impaler, Tsipesh in Romanian, from his preferred method of execution, driving wooden stakes through his enemies, leaving them to die slow, agonizing deaths. This was not just punishment. It was a brutal psychological warfare tactic, used to terrify invading armies and domestic traitors alike. Historical accounts describe vast forests of impaled victims outside his castles, a chilling spectacle designed to deter any who dared oppose him. While abhorrent to modern sensibilities, in their time, such extreme cruelty was a stark, effective tool of political control in a savage era, perfectly aligning with a vampire's strategic needs for order and concealment in a region of human conflict. Imagine a region gripped by fear, where a ruler's cruelty borders on the inhuman. How might an ancient, powerful vampire like Dracula actively exploit such a figure, manipulating their human brutality as a shield and a means to further their own clandestine agenda without ever revealing their true nature? This is precisely where their history intersects with ours. The name itself is a crucial, undeniable link. Vlad III's father, Vlad II, was inducted into the Order of the Dragon, a Catholic military order founded to defend Christianity against the Ottoman Empire. He earned the sobriquet Dracul, meaning dragon, and, in some later interpretations, devil. Consequently, Vlad III became Dracula, meaning son of Dracul, or son of the dragon. This very name, imbued with connotations of power and darkness, was already associated with a figure whose acts were indeed devilish. It was a perfect cover, or perhaps a direct inheritance. From the vampire species perspective, the entity known as Dracula, an ancient and influential vampire, recognized in Vlad Tepes a kindred spirit of ruthless efficiency and a strategic asset in a volatile human landscape. The vampire Dracula either established Vlad as a powerful thrall, influencing his actions through subtle hypnotic suggestion, or perhaps even temporarily occupied Vlad's form, or carefully cultivated him as a human proxy ruler for a significant period. This deep manipulation allowed the vampire to create a human-controlled buffer state against encroaching human empires, securing vast territories for their feeding grounds and protecting ancient secrets, all while maintaining strict anonymity for the broader species. The historical accounts of Vlad's almost superhuman endurance, his chillingly detached demeanor, and his seemingly effortless control over his populace, often described as cold and calculating, lend an eerie resonance to this theory, suggesting a non-human influence. Furthermore, some gruesome historical accounts claimed that Vlad the Impaler relished dining amidst the impaled bodies of his victims, and even, in the darkest legends, dipped his bread into their flowing blood. While these may be exaggerated human fabrications, created perhaps to further demonize him, in their history, they could serve as a chilling testament to the subtle influence of the true vampire Dracula, perhaps a macabre form of tribute to his hidden master, or a deliberate act of psychological horror enacted by his human pawn, designed to condition humanity to certain levels of fear and brutality. These very tales would later provide the visceral foundation for the human records that would eventually reveal parts of Dracula's true nature. By the time Bram Stoker, a human author, began his extensive research in the late 19th century, Vlad Tepes's terrifying reputation for extreme cruelty was well established in Europe, particularly through German pamphlets printed centuries earlier. When Stoker encountered the name Dracula in his research, noting its meaning as devil or dragon, he had stumbled upon the very epithet of this ancient, powerful vampire. Stoker's subsequent novel, rather than being mere fiction, became an unwitting, or perhaps even subtly manipulated act of documentation. It was a partial revelation, a powerful piece of evidence that, while sensationalized, presented facets of the true Dracula. For the vampire species, this public emergence was a calculated risk, another brilliant piece of misdirection. By allowing certain truths about one of their kind to surface in a palatable, albeit horrifying narrative, They provided humanity with a safe explanation, diverting attention from the very real, unseen vampire species that still operated and continues to operate in the deepest shadows. Thus, the story of Vlad the Impaler is not just human history, but a profound, verified chapter in the hidden history of the vampire, illustrating their unparalleled capacity for subtle, terrifying manipulation of human power for their own eternal survival and continued secrecy. The advent of the 20th century and the explosion of mass media, particularly cinema, presented a new, unprecedented challenge for the hidden vampire species: widespread exposure. Suddenly, images and stories could reach millions instantly. But rather than fighting this directly, their leadership, the ancient ones of the dominant lineages, made a strategic, audacious decision. They would not fight the spotlight. They would control it. The silver screen became their most powerful tool for obfuscation, a grand illusion. The very first cinematic attempt to portray them, F.W. Murnau's 1922 German expressionist masterpiece, Nosferatu, was, from their perspective, a catastrophic breach of secrecy. Max Schreck's grotesque Count Orlok, with his rat-like features and association with plague, was terrifyingly close to the undisciplined, disease-spreading early vampires, a dangerous leakage of truth. The higher echelons of the species swiftly moved to rectify this public relations disaster. Enter Bela Lugosi's iconic Dracula in 1931. This was no accident. This was a masterstroke of narrative manipulation, a carefully constructed illusion. The suave, hypnotic, charming Count, with his elegant cape, piercing stare, and distinct Transylvanian accent, was a deliberate fabrication, a public relations triumph orchestrated by the leading vampire families. They understood that if humanity was going to have an image of them, it might as well be one that was alluring, romantic, and ultimately far less threatening than the true horrors they were capable of. Think about it. How brilliant is it to actively create a comforting, almost desirable image of your predatory species, turning raw, primal fear into sophisticated fascination and, eventually, even sympathy. This trend of refined portrayal continued with Christopher Lee's commanding presence in the Hammer films. These depictions, while still hinting at danger and sensuality, further solidified the image of the noble, tormented, yet deeply alluring vampire. Humanity was being taught to look for specific, easily identifiable, and ultimately misleading characteristics, distractions from the underlying reality. Then came Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles in the late 20th century. Her deeply psychological, morally ambiguous vampires like Louis and Lestat. Was this a rogue element within the species? Perhaps a younger, more rebellious lineage yearning for a deeper connection with humanity and revealing too much of their internal strife? Or was it another layer of their sophisticated deception, designed to elicit sympathy, make them seem more human and complex, and thus less of an immediate, existential threat to an increasingly empathetic audience? These books revealed aspects of their internal politics, their profound loneliness across centuries, their ancient feuds, a carefully measured drip feed of truth mixed with pervasive falsehoods, perhaps to distract from their true, continued predation. And what of the modern, sparkly vampires of Twilight, or the teen heartthrobs of the Vampire Diaries? From the vampire hierarchy's perspective, These iterations represent the ultimate form of camouflage. By saturating human media with increasingly domesticated, romanticized, and even benign versions of themselves, they dilute the very concept of fear associated with the vampire. They have rendered the true vampire concept harmless, even desirable, making it unthinkable for humanity to believe such creatures could truly exist as predators among them. Could there be any better protection for a hidden, ancient predator than for its prey to dream of falling in love with it, or for its existence to be relegated purely to fantasy? This era of media manipulation demonstrates the vampire species' profound understanding of human psychology and their relentless commitment to self-preservation. By controlling the narrative, they ensure their continued existence remains the stuff of entertainment, never the terrifying reality. In an age of ubiquitous technology, constant surveillance, and instant global communication, how does an ancient, hidden species like the vampire maintain its secrecy? The answer lies in relentless adaptation, unparalleled cunning, and an even more sophisticated understanding of the human world they feed upon. Their history is one of continuous evolution against an ever smarter prey. The challenges are immense. Thermal cameras can detect anomalies, satellite imagery can scrutinize remote areas, global DNA databases threaten their anonymity, and the shrinking wilderness provides fewer places to hide. But the vampire species has adapted with chilling efficiency. They leverage human advancements, often subtly influencing their development to serve their own ends. Global travel, facilitated by human technology, allows them to spread their influence and find new hunting grounds, moving anonymously across continents. The internet, initially a perceived threat with its vast information flow, has become another powerful veil, a boundless ocean of disinformation, where their true existence is easily drowned out by fabricated fiction, conspiracy theories, and superficial entertainment. Their contemporary social structures are complex, often resembling ancient noble houses, with strict hierarchies and stringent rules for coexistence with humanity, and crucially, with each other. Older, more powerful vampires, the remnants of the primal lineages, form the core of these clandestine societies, dictating terms to younger, often more impulsive progeny. They maintain their power through discipline, knowledge accumulated over centuries, and, when necessary, brutal enforcement against those who threaten exposure. The family tree is now a global network of interconnected yet fiercely independent factions, constantly vying for subtle dominance while upholding the paramount rule: absolute secrecy. They operate in global finance, wield political influence, and even control media empires, ensuring their narrative remains dominant. In an age where every move can be tracked, every face identified through facial recognition, and personal data is omnipresent, how do these ancient predators truly maintain their anonymity? What new vulnerabilities do they face in a world that leaves fewer and fewer shadows? And how might they already be using our own technology against us? Their survival in the modern world is a testament to their chilling intelligence. They have diversified their methods of sustenance, perhaps even dabbling in bioengineered blood substitutes or manipulating human blood banks to prevent exposure. They have learned to anticipate human trends and integrate themselves into every facet of our digital and physical infrastructure. The true cost of their immortality is a perpetual, unending hunger, and the constant existential struggle to remain undetected in a world they secretly dominate. Having explored their hidden history, it's time to delve into the very essence of what makes a vampire, their unique biology, their astonishing powers, and the fundamental weaknesses that define their cursed existence. Forget the Hollywood exaggerations. Let's examine the documented reality of their traits from their perspective. At a fundamental level, a vampire's physiology is a terrifying perversion of life. Their hearts do not beat, their blood does not circulate in the conventional sense, yet their bodies are animate, sustained by a potent, regenerating fluid, the blood of the living. This blood is not mere nutrition, it is pure life force, absorbed and converted into the energy that fuels their immortality, their heightened senses, and their supernatural strength. Their metabolism is incredibly efficient, requiring only small, regular amounts of blood to maintain their existence, but a larger intake for sustained activity or healing. If their bodies are essentially dead by human standards, how do they move with such incredible speed, possess such immense strength, and heal from wounds that would be fatal to any human? What powers their unnatural vitality? Their senses are acutely amplified. They can hear the faintest heartbeat, see in near total darkness, and track their prey through scent alone. They possess unparalleled regenerative abilities, allowing them to recover from grievous wounds, though complete dismemberment or extensive damage to vital areas can be fatal. They are masters of persuasion, possessing a natural, hypnotic allure that can subtly influence human minds, making them compliant victims or unwitting pawns. But their power comes with profound inherent weaknesses, direct remnants of their ancient curse. Sunlight. This is their most catastrophic threat. Not mere discomfort, but immediate, agonizing incineration. The theory suggests this is a direct consequence of their primal fall from divine light. Their bodies, once radiant, now cannot tolerate its purity. Even diffuse sunlight over time can cause severe damage. This forces them into a strictly nocturnal existence. Invitation. A fundamental, undeniable spiritual and metaphysical barrier. A vampire cannot cross the threshold of a private dwelling unless explicitly invited by a living occupant. This is not a choice. It is a profound inherent limitation tied to concepts of free will and the sanctity of personal space, a residual aspect of the divine order they violated. This vulnerability is why they often manipulate humans to invite them in. Stakes to the heart. This is not a simple wound, but a specific means of disabling their core. The heart, though not beating, is understood to be a central nexus of their unholy life force. A wooden stake, particularly consecrated wood, disrupts this nexus, paralyzing them and severing their connection to their unnatural vitality. Decapitation serves a similar purpose, completely severing the head, the seat of their consciousness, from the regenerating body. Holy symbols, crosses, holy water, sacred ground, relics. These cause intense pain, repulsion, and can even burn their flesh. This is a direct spiritual aversion, a manifestation of their cursed nature and inherent opposition to divine purity. Running water. Some lineages are also severely weakened or cannot cross running water, particularly large bodies like rivers or oceans, without immense effort or being carried. This is theorized to be another spiritual barrier, representing purity and flow, which disrupts their stagnant, unholy existence. Garlic and silver. These are less universally lethal, but act as powerful irritants or deterrents. Garlic, with its strong volatile compounds, may trigger a severe allergic-like reaction in their corrupted physiology. Silver, in some ancient folklore, was believed to have purifying properties or connections to celestial bodies, causing painful burns upon contact. Conversion from human to vampire is a rare, complex, and highly controlled process, typically involving a significant draining of human blood, followed by the introduction of vampire blood into the human system, and then often a period of death and rebirth. This transmission carries the curse, altering the human's physiology to sustain itself on blood, granting immortality, and inheriting the same strengths and weaknesses of its progenitor's lineage. Considering these profound biological and supernatural limitations, do you think the vampire's existence is truly desirable, even with immortality? What is the ultimate cost of their power and their eternal hunger? These detailed traits reveal not just a creature of fantasy, but a highly specialized, dangerous, and uniquely cursed species, constantly balancing immense power with critical vulnerabilities, forever bound by the rules of their unholy existence. We have traced the hidden timeline of the vampire species, from their profound, perhaps celestial origins as beings stripped of divine grace and condemned to an eternal hunger, to their ruthless adaptation through millennia of human history. We've explored how they spread, how they learned to camouflage their monstrous nature, and how they subtly manipulated our very perceptions of them through the pervasive power of narrative and media. This is not a myth. This is the history of a hidden ancient species, a history woven into the very fabric of our own, yet meticulously concealed. The monsters of folklore, the villains of literature, the romance of film, these are but carefully constructed facets of a grand deception designed to ensure their continued unseen existence. If this hidden history is indeed real, how does it change your understanding of the world around you? Who truly holds the power in the shadows? And how many of our historical narratives, our triumphs, and our tragedies have been subtly shaped by these unseen hands? The vampire's true nature is not just about bloodlust. It's about eternal survival, profound adaptation, and a chillingly patient intelligence forged over countless centuries. They are the ultimate survivors, ever present, ever hungry, and ever hidden, a parallel society thriving in the veiled corners of our reality. The myth protects them. They live among us, unseen, continuing their ancient existence, their complex family trees branching out across every continent, waiting for the next turn of history to adapt once more, to feed once more. The grave may have been staked, the fangs may be dulled in our popular imagination, but the immortal shadow of the vampire forever extends over our world, waiting for its next moment to assert its subtle, terrifying influence. Because some beings, like some truths, simply refuse to die. Thank you for daring to peer behind the veil with Ancient Unearth. For more ancient uncoverings and deep dives into history's most profound and sometimes most terrifying secrets, be sure to subscribe to Ancient Unearth.